I truly cannot make a video that is, in my opinion, good enough to be posted today. I'm gonna sure as hell try, though. Over the last 250 years, the United States has serviced a lot of military aircraft. In this video, we're going to be going over 10 of the biggest ones that I thought have made the biggest difference over all of the major conflicts the United States has seen. Now, I want to note that there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles that have made a major difference. I don't have time to cover all of them. In this video, we're going to only be going over 10, which is a very small handful, but I have a feeling you guys know each and every single one of these vehicles pretty well. We're not perfect. We've had mistakes, but we've also had a lot of great moments. And this video, it's not going to be the best video ever made, but America only turns 250 once. I may as well make a video on it. Over the last 250 years, 1.2 million troops have made the ultimate sacrifice. 41 million Americans have served in the United States military. 3,536 of those individuals have received the Medal of Honor. 150,000 Silver Stars have been rewarded, and 1.9 million Purple Hearts have been given out to wounded troops. The nation only turns 250 once. It sure as hell is a day to remember. The P-51 Mustang is arguably the most recognizable U.S. aircraft ever made. The P-51 entered service in 1942 in need for a long-range bomber escort to escort B-17s and British bombers into Berlin. Over 15,000 were made during World War II, and what made the P-51 so dangerous was its two-stage, supercharged Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The Mustang was designed utilizing advanced manufacturing techniques that favored mass production. The P-51 saw 213,000 combat sorties flown by American pilots. 2,500 aircraft were lost to combat, with 5,000 air-to-air kills against German fighters and Japanese fighters in the Pacific. One of the most notable units ever that flew the P-51 was the Tuskegee Airmen, the 332nd Fighter Group, who alone flew over 15,000 sorties and were also famously nicknamed the Red Tails. The P-51 could reach top speeds of roughly 440 miles per hour and was lethal at high altitudes. It was heavily armed with 650 caliber Browning machine guns, giving it the devastating hitting power and ammunition capacity required to destroy German aircraft like the Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf 190. The Mustang was designed to be able to escort long-range bombers deep into Germany. It served a critical role in the European front. It was used in the Pacific theater, but wasn't necessarily as good as other aircraft there. German pilots viewed the P-51 Mustang with deep respect and eventual dread. They considered it a highly formidable, well-crafted adversary that outmatched their own fighters at high altitudes. While they appreciated its flight performance, many German aces were baffled by the complexity of its cockpit. Keep in mind, a lot of German aircraft designed at the time were made to be simple, to get out and get the job done. The P-51, when it entered service, was one of the most advanced fighters ever seen during World War II, and the fact that it was designed to be able to be mass-produced made it a very dangerous aircraft against Germany. The Americans also had one of the greatest training for its pilots out there, arguably the best that we've ever seen. The P-51 Mustang will go down as the greatest World War II fighter to many. Maybe outside of a handful of German things like the Messerschmitt, it might be the greatest ever seen during World War II. It did see service in Korea as the F-51 variants, like the F-51H, but it was mostly noted and known for its actions during World War II, escorting B-17s and B-24s deep into Germany. The P-51 should be remembered in U.S. history as one of the greatest World War II aircraft. Arguably speaking, this is a plane that you will see and just think American. I mean, this is truly a deliverance of freedom, and I can't think of a lot of aircraft better than the P-51 Mustang. Arguably the most important helicopter in U.S. history is the UH-60 Blackhawk. There have been over 5,000 that have been produced, and it first saw flight in 1974. It accommodates a 4-person crew and up to 11 fully equipped troops. It has an combat range of approximately 370 miles and a maximum speed of 183 miles per hour. The Black Hawk entered service in 1979. It is highly regarded for its versatility and is used for troop transport, medical evacuation, medevac, search and rescue, and armed assault missions. Not a lot of people seem to realize that the Black Hawk really is the workhorse of the United States Army. This is a helicopter that does absolutely everything. It can do search and rescue with the Pave Hawk variants, the HH-60W models, which are heavily modified Black Hawks that are made to do search and rescue missions for downed pilots. We've seen that recently in conflicts around the world with the US. It also has a lot of naval variants, like the Seahawk, the R and S models. These are helicopters that are made to do anti-submarine warfare, as well as open ocean search and rescue. We also have Black Hawk variants for special mission warfare. Things like the 160th SOAR has refueling probes for their Black Hawk, as you see here in the video, and their models are called the DAP, or Direct Action Penetrator. This is a variant that is heavily armored with rockets and missiles. The Black Hawk can outfit something called the ESSS, or external wings. This allows it to carry Hellfires, Stinger missiles, unguided rockets. They have cabin-mounted machine guns. They can also refit external fuel tanks on these wing models. The Black Hawk can be anywhere around the globe in a heartbeat. They can put the Black Hawk on the C-130, the C-5. It is truly the helicopter that has been the workhorse of the United States for the last 5 decades, and it will be for at least another 3. The Black Hawk is expected to be the main platform for the United States through at least 2054. Yes, the replacement for the Black Hawk has entered production recently, but it is still a ways out from fully replacing this workhorse. Always keep in mind that the Black Hawk has been around since the 70s, and it will be around for much longer. It is a truly beautiful helicopter that has done everything and has seen absolutely everything. The Chance Vought Corsair is one of the greatest planes ever used by the US military. Seeing service with the United States Navy and United States Marine Corps for over a decade, it first flew in the early 1940s and was used extensively during World War II and even used in the Korean War. Also notably, it was one of the first propeller aircraft to ever shoot down a jet fighter. The F4U Corsair was powered by an R2800 double wasp 18-cylinder radical engine, which allowed it to push speeds over 440 miles per hour. During World War II, the F4U Corsair put up an 11-to-1 kill ratio. The Japanese initially mocked the Vought Corsair's unique bent wing design as awkward and rushed. However, as it entered service with the US Navy, it dominated the skies with an incredible 11-to-1 kill ratio. The dismissiveness turned to genuine terror. They called it the Whistling Death from there on, fearing its unmatched speed, heavy firepower, and superior diving capabilities. The F4U Corsair was armed with 6 50 caliber machine guns, and then later models had the 20mm. The F4U Corsair was notoriously difficult to fly due to massive engine torque, terrible forward visibility, and unpredictable low-speed handling. These quirks made the fighter incredibly dangerous during critical phases of flight, particularly when young, inexperienced pilots attempted to take off or land on aircraft carriers. Sadly, we lost a lot of young American pilots to the Corsair's long, radical engine design, often referred to as a nickname from US pilots being hog-nosed due to its long nose. It's really sad that we lost pilots this way, and it's really sad when you lose someone, especially in combat, but even more so when you lose them to something that isn't even combat related. The Corsair's ruggedness and firepower made it a favorite for close air support, noticeably acting as an, air quote, Angel of Okinawa for Marines during the Pacific War. It was one of the few combat planes to serve in both World War II and the Korean War, and remained in production for over a decade, with more than 12,500 units built. The F4U Corsair is oftentimes overshadowed by things like the F-6F Hellcat and the F-8F Bearcat. But without the Corsair, it's a real possibility the United States would not have been able to push back on the Japanese as hard as we did, especially during times like Okinawa. People think of the Hellcat's amazing 13-to-1 kill-to-death ratio, but keep in mind the Hellcat was built from the ground up with the lessons learned with the Wildcat. The Corsair didn't have that. It had to adapt and overcome. The Corsair originally was not seen in action with the US Navy and only was used by the United States Marine Corps due to the hard capabilities of the Corsair of landing on the aircraft carrier. Eventually, in 1942, these issues were fixed. The Corsair immediately entered service on board U.S. Navy aircraft carriers with the United States Navy and Marine Corps, and it started to dominate. During the battles of Okinawa, the Corsair was favored for carrier air patrols because it could stay in the air a lot longer than the Hellcat. It could carry 3 fuel tanks compared to the Hellcat only being able to carry 1. Keep in mind, the Corsair is also one of the first aircraft used during nighttime operations, and it was an aircraft that helped pioneered air-to-air fighting during the night. I also know that the Hellcat did the exact same thing, but the Corsair stayed in service and even did nighttime actions in the Korean War and shot down MiG-15s during the Korean War. The Corsair is truly one of the most beautiful naval fighters ever built, and honestly, the most dominant. Arguably, the most recognizable close air support aircraft of all time is the A-10 Thunderbolt II, or more famously nicknamed the Warthog. The A-10 entered service in 1977, and 716 of these flying beasts were built. Now, the A-10 is most famously recognizable for its 30mm Gow-8 Avenger Gatling gun and the titanium bathtub armor that keeps the pilots locked away safely in the cockpit. Now, the ordnance that the A-10 can carry is up to 16,000 pounds of mixed munitions, including Maverick missiles, laser-guided rockets, and smart bombs. The United States Air Force was in need of a close air support aircraft to replace the A-1 Skyraider during the Vietnam War. The F-4 and F-105 were too fast and too vulnerable for the mission. The United States Army was in desperate need for an aircraft that could perform the close air support role. They were too vulnerable and they needed help. The A-10 is what the program was born out of. Now, the A-10 Warthog, or the A-10, is most formally known for its air support. It isn't known for air-to-air. However, the Warthog has had 2 air-to-air kills. During the 1991 Gulf War, U.S. Air Force A-10s officially recorded 2 air-to-air kills against Iraqi helicopters. February 6, 1991, Captain Robert Swain, flying an A-10 from the 706th Tactical Fighter Squadron, used his 30mm Gow-8 Avenger cannon to shoot down an Iraqi Mi-8 helicopter. This marked the first ever kill for the A-10 platform. In February 11th of 1991, another A-10 pilot, Captain Paul T. Johnson, also used the 30mm cannon to shoot down an Iraqi Mi-17. Now, the A-10 has been on the cusp of retirement for years now. However, every single time that it looks like this aircraft is going to be put into the hangars forever, it comes right back. Congress has said the A-10 must stay. The Air Force doesn't want it, but the grunts certainly do. Now, the cool fact about the A-10 Warthog is when developing the Gow-8, when it was put onto the A-10 and they did firing trials, the gun would literally rattle the airplane apart, and the dirty air from the gun would kill the engines. The A-10 literally would lose its engines because of the gun's firing effect. That's literally insane, bringing itself down just by firing the 30mm. The A-10 has had some troubled history in the past. When used in the early 2000s in conflicts around the world, the A-10 did not have any sort of modern targeting system. That was a big reason why the A-10C was pushed so heavily, and it was upgraded with targeting pods and all the new stuff that the A-10C had, but early A-10A variants didn't have this. This required pilots to be using things like binoculars, and this led to friendly fire accidents. The most noticeable one being when United States Air Force A-10s attacked British ground troops. And sadly, several friendly fire accidents happened, blue on blue as it's so called. It is really sad when an aircraft that was made out of a program to keep these grunts alive ends up doing the opposite. The A-10 will go down in history as one of the, if not the most formidable strike platform ever built. The A-10 is going to live in legacy forever, and I'm just happy that it kept so many grunts alive. I know for a fact the boots on the ground love the A-10. I've heard it from so many guys that this plane has saved their lives. Friendly fire accidents are always hard, but just think of all the guys that got to come home because of the A-10. The F-86 Sabre is one of the most recognizable U.S. aircraft of all time. It is largely recognized for its first ever, for the time for the United States, swept-back design that closely resembled the Soviet Union's MiG-15. Now, the max speed of the F-86 was 685 miles per hour, or Mach 0.92. It was capable of breaking the sound barrier in a dive. Its power plant was a General Electric J47 turbojet producing over 5,000 pounds of thrust depending on the model of Sabre. It entered service in 1949 with 9,860 Sabres produced over the time period. The F-86 Sabre was armed with 650 caliber machine guns, and later models also had 4 20mm cannons. Now, one of the most noticeable engagements for the Sabre, what it's best known for, was dogfighting the Mikoyan-Gorovich MiG-15 in high-speed dogfights in the skies of the Korean War in the 1950s. These were the first ever jet-on-jet dogfights, and it's what shaped the history of air-to-air combat for both the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, the North Koreans began their war against South Korea on June 25, 1950, with small numbers of Soviet aircraft. Now, these aircraft were things like the Yak-9 and other Soviet World War II. Now, the United States entered the conflict with things like the B-29 and P-51 Mustang, and early jet fighters like the F-80 Shooting Star, F-84 Thunderjet, and Grumman F-9F Panther. They flew the skies over Korea virtually unopposed. During October of that year, the major communist powers, China and the Soviet Union, commenced unofficial military support of North Korea. The Soviets also committed to supply North Korea and China with its latest MiG-15 fighters and to train Korean and Chinese pilots to fly. Now, when the North Koreans received the MiG-15, suddenly they were the ones dominating the skies over Korea. In response to the deployment of MiG-15s, the United Nations P-51 squadrons began to convert to jet fighters. In the case of the United States Air Force, this was the F-86 Sabre. And they took to the skies in some of the most brilliant dogfights the world has ever seen. In fact, these dogfights were so brilliant that they were later named a certain whole area for this fights as MiG Alley. It was the name given by the United Nations during the Korean War to the northwestern position of North Korea, where the Yalu River empties into the Yellow Sea. It was the site of numerous dogfights between UN fighter pilots and their opponents from North Korea, including some that were crewed by Soviet airmen. The MiG-15 were the aircraft used during most of the conflicts against Sabres, and the area's nickname was derived from them. Overall, 792 MiG-15s were shot down, and 78 Sabres were shot down to the MiG. The Sabre, in fact, was so advanced to the MiG-15 that when a F-86 was recovered that had to make an emergency landing, it was immediately shipped back to the Soviet Union to begin being produced as a Russian aircraft. Eventually, they settled for studying it. The F-86 being the first all-large production jet fighter for the United States, it had a lot of records that it personally broke, and in fact, to share one of them, I have fellow content creator Killa West.
Operation Boomerang. On Armed Forces Day, May 21st, 1955, First Lieutenant John M. Jack Conroy of the 115th Fighter Squadron, California Air National Guard, piloted a specifically prepared North American F-86A Sabre jet from Van Nuys Airport, California to Floyd Bennett Field, New York, and back. This historic flight, dubbed Operation Boomerang, covered 5,058 miles in 11 hours, 26 minutes, and 33 seconds, entirely between official sunrise and sunset. The aircraft, nicknamed California Boomerang, was meticulously modified over 2 weeks by a dedicated ground crew to minimize drag and maximize performance. Modifications included shaving rivet heads, filling seams, covering gun ports, precise rigging of flight controls, and rebuilding the J-47 engine. The effort paid off as Conroy achieved speeds up to 600 miles per hour at approximately 40,000 feet. The flight included 2 refueling stops, eastbound and 3 westbound due to the headwinds. It broke the previous transcontinental round-trip record set by Paul Mantz in a P-51 Mustang on September 3rd, 1947.
An aircraft that a lot of Americans made the ultimate sacrifice flying was the American F-4 Phantom. The F-4 Phantom entered service in 1960. It was powered by twin J29 engines. The Phantom achieved a top speed of Mach 2.2 and set 15 world records for speed, altitude, and time to climb. With 5,195 units produced, it is the most prolific American supersonic jet in history. Its robust design saw service from the Vietnam War through to the 1991 Gulf Wars. The F-4 Phantom scored approximately 150 confirmed air-to-air kills during the Vietnam War, where brave American pilots took to the skies to dogfight more nimble MiG-21 and MiG-17s. And noticeably, these Phantoms were outclassed. They had no gun. The rules of engagement did not allow the Phantom to do what it was made to do, which was to use beyond visual range radar and missiles like the AIM-7 Sparrow to be able to keep far away from the dogfight. The advanced radar and missile tactics that the Phantom was designed to use was not usable in the Vietnam conflict. The radar intercept officer was now essentially useless. The F-4 Phantom achieved a total of 15 confirmed air-to-air gun kills during the Vietnam War. Because early Phantoms were designed strictly around missile doctrine, these kills were confirmed using two different methods late in the conflict, either being a gun pod outfitted on older Phantom models like the F-4C and the F-4D, or being one of the Phantoms outfitted with a gun later on in the war, like the F-4E. This includes a famous June 7, 1972 engagement where an F-4E scored a historic first and only supersonic gun kill at Mach 1.2. The F-4 Phantom goes down in history for a lot of people as an aircraft that saw use with the United States for over 3 decades, and saw heavy conflict and fighting during the Vietnam War. But it should go down in history for different reasons. The brave men who took to the skies in the F-4 Phantom knew for a fact they did not have the training or the ability to go toe-to-toe with the MiG-21 or MiG-17. They had no gun, and they did not have the proper training for dogfighting. The United States Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps had shifted tactics. They thought the war of the future was going to be fought in beyond visual range. They didn't think they needed to learn how to dogfight. The Navy pilots, Marine Corps pilots, and Air Force pilots who took to the skies during the Vietnam War knew that there was a real chance they didn't come home. And sadly, a lot of Americans, that did end up happening to them. The F-4 Phantom is certainly an aircraft that helped pave the way for modern conflicts. It taught us things like BVR. It taught us how rules of engagements work, and it was the aircraft that bridged the gap from things like the F-86 to more advanced fighters that we even see in today's conflicts. One of the most recognizable and important naval aircraft of all time is the F-18 and its predecessor, the F-A-18 Super Hornet. The F-18 entered service in 1984 and served with the U.S. Navy until 2019. It was the most important aircraft, in my opinion, ever for the U.S. Navy, simply because it was the first ever truly successful multi-role strike fighter. It was designed to seamlessly switch between air-to-air combat and ground strike missions in a single mission. It has served as the backbone of Navy and Marine Corps carrier aviation for decades, and is going to continue to serve alongside things like the F-35 for at least another 2. Now, the F-18 has been retired, but the Super Hornet is still in service. The predecessor being, the F-18E and F-A-18F, basically took the amazing design of the F-18C and F-18D and made it way better. They increased the range, they increased the payload capacity, they increased the size of the wings, and the F-18F became a twin seat to allow for a weapons systems officer or radar intercept officer. Now, the big thing with the Hornet and Super Hornet is that, yes, a lot of people who have been supporters of U.S. Navy aviation aren't actually the biggest fans of the F-18, and I do understand why. For a lot of people growing up, the F-14 was their fighter, and the F-A-18 retired it. And I understand that the F-14 was the more capable air-to-air platform at the time, but it was not the more capable aircraft. And the reason why the Hornet and Super Hornet make this list is very simple. The, the most dangerous job in aviation as a pilot is flying off of a carrier. And the United States currently, I believe, operates 11 nuclear carriers. This means that all the time, during night, during day, during rain or high water, during, all sorts of different mission outcomes and strike missions or air-to-air missions or just normal flight testing and training, pilots are constantly doing a very dangerous thing, and that is operating off of an aircraft carrier. And a lot of people have sadly lost their lives. A lot of pilots, a lot of Rios have lost their life operating Hornets or Super Hornets. And this is an aircraft that is the protector, in my opinion, the number one protector of the United States, because when the mission comes and there is a need to go to war, the first on the scene are going to be Hornets. They're going to be Super Hornets operating off of Navy carriers. The F-18 might not be everyone's favorite, but it absolutely demands respect, because this is what America is going to put on the forefront of any modern conflict or any major war of the future. Imagine an aircraft so deadly that the enemy gives you the nickname Fork-Tailed Devil. The P-38 is an aircraft that probably has the biggest list of history ever for the United States. The key feature of the P-38 Lightning was the twin boom design. Unlike traditional fighters, it featured a central cockpit flanked by two booms housing its engines. Therefore, it allowed it to have nose-mounted guns. All four 50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon were packed tightly in the nose, providing a concentrated, devastating stream of fire that did not rely on wing coverage. Its exceptional range and heavy fuel capacity made it a vital asset in the massive expanses of the Pacific Theater, and what a lot of people don't know is the P-38 also escorted B-17s and B-24s in the European theater prior to the arrival of the P-51 Mustang. Now, the P-38 was the first American fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour, and it featured turbo superchargers, allowing it to perform effectively up to 42,000 feet. And this is where we can start to get into the history of the P-38 and why it is the most decorated aircraft of all time, in my opinion, in U.S. service. If you guys haven't noticed already, the P-38 on the screen looks a little bit different. That's because it is Marge. And the reason why is that was Major Richard Dick Bong's aircraft. If you guys do not know who Richard Bong is, he was America's all-time ace, nicknamed the Ace of Aces, scoring an unmatched 40 confirmed aerial victories during World War II. He achieved every single one of his combat kills while flying the Lockheed P-38 Lightning in the Pacific Theater. This guy was a true American hero. And another absolute important mission the P-38 flew was Operation Vengeance. This was the highly classified U.S. military mission that used Lockheed P-38 Lightnings to ambush and shoot down the mastermind of Pearl Harbor, Admiral Ishiru Yamato, on April 18, 1943. U.S. Navy cryptonologists intercepted and decoded a Japanese radio message detailing Yamato's exact itinerary down to the minute for a morale-boosting inspection tour in the Solomon Islands. The P-38 was chosen due to having the range. The aircraft needed to fly 435 miles from the Allied bases at Guadalcanal, and the P-38 was the only aircraft that could do this with specialized drop fuel tanks. The P-38 Lightning is not known by a lot of players or people, and that's just a major shame because it is honestly one of the most important aircraft the United States has ever fielded. And tragically, it had a very troubled beginning. The P-38 Lightning struggled a lot in initial combat roles in the Pacific Theater because of an engine issue. If the P-38 lost an engine, especially on takeoff, it was almost always a devastating loss of control, which resulted in the loss of life. And especially seen a lot from Guadalcanal, especially in Richard Bong's unit, the P-38 suffered tragic losses on takeoff, sadly way too often, and they also suffered heavy combat losses. The P-38 was a frontline fighter. It saw service in ways that a lot of other fighters never did, especially early on in the war before things like the F-4U Corsair took over. The P-38 really needs to go down in American history as the most important twin-engine fighter during World War II, in my honest opinion. Without this plane, we never would have had the Ace of Aces, we never would have shot down Admiral Yamato, and who knows, the the outcome of World War II in the Pacific could have drastically changed if Yamato had stayed alive, and without the Ace of Aces morale boost, who honestly knows how the war could have ended. It's just kind of crazy to think about that this aircraft was so devastating in both the Pacific and European theaters that it was given the nickname the Fork-tailed Devil. Just honestly, what a crazy thought to have this thing screaming down on you, shooting 50 caliber machine guns and 20mm cannons. I would not want to be a German or Japanese pilot with this thing on my 6. When you think of attack helicopters, one of the first ones you will always think about is the AH-64 Apache. First introduced in 1986, over 2,700 have been produced, and you know it is one hell of an aircraft if it is still in production 4 decades after first being introduced. During the 1970s, the United States were seeking an advanced attack helicopter capable of engaging enemy armor at long distances with anti-tank guided missiles, as the biggest threat to the United States during this time period was a land attack from the Soviet Union in Europe, and obviously we could not have that. After learning lessons during the Vietnam War with the Cobra and Huey helicopters, and especially with the Cobra gunships, we saw that there was actually great potential for an attack helicopter built from the ground up instead of just being a copy variant of the Huey. You guys actually don't know about the Cobra's make. It essentially was the same as the Huey, they just changed and made it a little more sleek to be a better gunship. The AH-64 Apache has received so many upgrades over the years to remain absolutely the most modern variant they could have. Currently in service is the AH-64E Sky Guardian, and let me just say that these helicopters are just so freaking advanced, it isn't even funny. They were one of the first helicopters to ever see the TAN/PNVS system, or Target Acquisition and Designation System Pilot Night Vision System. This allowed pilots to be able to engage targets that were hiding in smoke or having a slower thermal image, like a tank that had everything off but maybe was idling the engine. Previously, this wasn't any way for any helicopter or fixed-wing aircraft to engage it, but now the Apache could. Now, another crazy thing about the Apache was the 30mm gun that was fitted to a aiming system that allowed the M320 chain gun to essentially aim wherever the gunner looks at. And that's another robust thing that's built into this helicopter. The AH-64 Apache is built with highly redundant dual systems, dual engines, hydraulic, electrical, and this allows for high survivability. In combat, it also features a 2-crew tandem. One is a pilot, one is a gunner/co-pilot, and some variants include a dual radar system for advanced targeting. So the AH-64 Apache is built to go into conflicts, to fight hard, fight dirty, but come out victorious. It's not a helicopter you send in when you just want a peace mission. It's a helicopter you send in when you need a mission taken care of now. The AH-64 Apache has been guarding American troops for the last 40 years, and it's going to do it for another 40 years. I find it very hard to think that any helicopter can come in and ever replace the Apache, at least not anytime soon. The Apache is just too iconic and will go down in the history books as one of the most, if not the most, iconic helicopter ever produced, and probably ever in the United States history. When you think of the United States military, this is the aircraft you think about. The F-15 Eagle has been screaming perfection since 1976 when it was introduced with the United States Air Force. During the Vietnam War, we saw that the F-4 Phantom had a lot of things that were right. It could do a lot of things brilliantly when it was actually allowed to due to the rules of engagement. And then the Soviets had to F around and find out. They introduced the MiG-25, which scared everyone in the West. We did not have an aircraft to counter the Foxbat. Well, until we did. The F-15 Eagle was born, and let's just say it's been dominating the skies for decades. The F-15 Eagle has been improved upon 10 times over, from the F-15A to the now insane F-15EX. This is an aircraft that has been perfecting air-to-air combat and even air-to-ground combat for decades. This is an aircraft that has a kill ratio of 104 to 0 in air-to-air combat. To clear up some confusion on that, this only counts air-to-air, and it does not count friendly fire accidents like the Kuwaiti F-18 shooting down the American F-15Es in the recent Iran conflicts. Now, the F-15 has, yes, a lot of these kills being awarded to things like the MiG-23 or Mirage F-1s, and those aren't necessarily near-peer competitors. But keep in mind, the F-15 also does have kills against things like the MiG-25 and the MiG-29. Now, let's just be very thankful that we haven't had to see a conflict that has pitted things like the Su-27 or Su-30 against aircraft like the F-15. We don't really want to see that. No one really wants to have another war. Now, the F-15 has seen a lot of variants, like we said earlier. The F-15A, the C, the E, which became the Strike Eagle. The F-15 has been perfecting everything that is the true embodiment of an American aircraft for so long. It's just hard to think of an Air Force, or at least a U.S. Air Force, without the F-15 Eagle. This is a plane that I would be shocked if it doesn't serve for 100 years. It has 50 years still in it for sure, especially with the F-15EX. Now, when you think of all the pilots that have taken out combat sorties, and they didn't know the missions that they could be facing, this is a time period where they still were not sure if the F-15 was as good as the Foxbat. And this was also at a time period where the Soviets were pressing the MiG-29 and the Su-27. And yet, brave American pilots took to the skies every single day, either it being intercepting Russian aircraft when they approached the no-fly zones in Alaska, or even in conflicts in Iraq. Brave American pilots have taken to the skies in the F-15 since 1976. They will continue to do so for as long as the need is there. The F-15 Eagle is a true American aircraft, and it is just a true embodiment of what happens when you take something out of a need and make it a necessity. The F-15 was not needed during the Vietnam War. The F-4 Phantom was good enough. But then when the Soviets pushed the MiG-23 and the MiG-25 and we saw that we were going to be outclassed, we had to make a fighter that still realistically isn't outclassed unless it's by a 5th generation fighter. They had to make a whole new generation to compete with the F-15. I told you guys the video wouldn't be perfect, and it certainly still doesn't feel like it's worth posting, and it feels kind of, to be honest, a failure when compared to everything that this nation has done in the last 250 years. But, like I also said, America only turns 250 one time, and I'd feel really bad if I never decided to celebrate it. The United States is not a perfect nation, no nation is. The United States has had its ups, and it's had its downs. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making it, even though I spent way too long, to be honest. I haven't slept in 3 days. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Only 12% of my current viewers are subscribed. I appreciate the support. Happy birthday, America. I've been astonished of what this nation has done over the last 250 years. I can't wait to see what America does in the next 250 years. Not that I'll be around for that, but, well, hopefully not. I don't want to live 250 more years. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.